start with the prayers. Om Shanno Mitra Sham Varunaha Shanno Bhavatvaryama Shanna Indro Brihaspatihi Shanno Vishnurukramaha Namo Brahmane Namaste Vayo Tvameva Pratyaksham Brahmasi Tvameva Pratyaksham Brahma Vadishyami Ritam Vadishyami Satyam Vadishyami Tanmamavatu Tadvaktaram Avatu Avatu Mam Avatu Vaktaram Om Shanti 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 Sahana Vavatu Sahanau Bhunaktu Sahaviryankaravavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Yaschandasa mrishabho vishwarupaha chandobhyodhyamritaat sambabhuva samendro medhaya aspranotu amritasya devadharano bhuyasam shariram me vicharshanam jihva me madhumattama karna abhyam bhuri vishruvam brahmanav koshosi medhaya pihitaha shrutam me gopaya. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Aham rikshasya reriva kirtif prishtam gireriva urdhupavitro vajiniva swamritamasmi dravinagum savarchasam sumedha amritokshitaha itirtishankor vedanu. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Purnamadav Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnamevavashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Apyayantu mama angani Vakpranaschakshuh Shrotramatho Balamindriyani cha sarvani Sarvam Brahma Upanishadam Maham Brahma Nirakuryam Mama Brahma Nirakarot Anirakaranamastu Anirakaranam me astu Tadatmani Nirteya Upanishatsu Dharmaha Te Mai Santu Te Mai Santu. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Vang me manasi pratisthita Mano me vachi pratishthitam Avir maedhi Vedasya maani istha Shrutam me ma prahasihi Anenaditena Ahoratran sandadhami Ritam vadishyami Satyam vadishyami Tanmamavatu Tadvaktaram Avatu Mam Avatu Vaktaram. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Bhadram no apivataya manaha. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Bhadram karnebhih shrunuyama devaah Bhadram pashyema akshabhiryajatraah Sthirairangaistuštuvagum sastanubhih Vyashema devahitan yadayuh Swasti na indro vriddhashravah Swasti nah pusha vishvavedah Swasti nastarksho arishtanemihi Swasti no brihaspati dadhatu. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Yo brahmanam vidadhati purvam यो वै वेदांश्च प्रहिणोति तस्मै तगुंहदेवमात्मबुद्धिप्रकाशं मुमुक्षुर्वै शरणमहं प्रपद्ये। ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः। श्रुतिस्मृतिपुराणानाम् आलयं करुणालयं नमामि भगवत्पाद शङ्करं लोकशङ्करं शङ्करं शङ्कराचार्यं केशवं बादरायणं सूत्रभाष्यकृतौ वन्दे भगवन्तौ पुनः पुनः। ॐ विश्वं दर्पणदृश्यमाननगरी तुल्यं निजान्तर्गतं पश्यन्नात्मनि मायया वैरिवोद्भूतं यथा निद्रया यत्साक्षात् कुरुते प्रबोधसमये स्वात्मानमेवाद्वयं तस्मै श्रीगुरुमूर्तये नमः। इदं श्रीदक्षिणामूर्तये। बीजस्यान्तरिवाङ्कुरो जगदिदं प्राङ्निर्विकल्पं पुनः मायाकल्पितदेशकालकलना वैचित्र्यचित्रीकृतं मायावीव विजृम्भयत्यपि महायोगी वयस्वेच्छया तस्मै श्रीगुरुमूर्तये नमः। इदं श्रीदक्षिणामूर्तये। यस्यैव स्फुरणं सदात्मकम् असत्कल्पार्थकं भासते साक्षात् तत्त्वमसीति वेदवचसा यो बोधयत्याश्रितान् यत्साक्षात् करणात् भवेन्न पुनरावृत्तिर्भवाम्भोनिधौ तस्मै श्रीगुरुमूर्तये नमः। इदं श्रीदक्षिणामूर्तये। नानाच्छिद्रघटोत्तरस्थितमहादीपप्रभाभास्वरं ज्ञानं यस्य तु चक्षुरादिकरणद्वारा बहिस्पन्दते जानामीति तमेव भान्तमनुभात्येतत्समस्तं जगत् तस्मै श्रीगुरुमूर्तये नमः। इदं श्रीदक्षिणामूर्तये। देहं प्राणमपीन्द्रियानपि चलां बुद्धिं च शून्यं विदुः स्त्रीबालान्दजडोपस्वामहमति भ्रान्ताभृशं वादिनः मायाशक्तिविलासकल्पितमहाव्यामोहसंहारिणे तस्मै श्रीगुरुमूर्तये नमः। इदं श्रीदक्षिणामूर्तये। I neglected to chant the Narayanam, so let's do that now. Narayanam Padmabhuvam Vasishtam Shaktim Cha Tatputra Parasharam Cha Vyasam Shukam Gaudapadam Mahantam Govinda Yogindra Mathasya Shishyam Shri Shankaracharya Mathasya Padmapadam Cha Hastamalakam Cha Shishyam Tam Totakam Vartikakaramanyan Asmat Gurun Santatamanatosmi. So we looked at in the last class the Artha Prati Pramanam from Shastra. So the Laukika Pramanam and the Shastra Pramanam, which is also called Shabda Jnanam. So Shabda Jnana means something that can be pointed out that cannot be done any other way. It's called Shabda Jnanam. So the Shastra Pramanam falls under Shabda Jnanam. So, we can look at it a couple of different ways. One is that if you are in a dream and you are in the dream world, which looks very real to you and so on, you cannot just wake yourself up as a dream character and says, okay, I'm now a dream character and now I'm going to wake up and I'm going to falsify everything. This is what I'm going to do. You can't do that. So what has to happen if you were to get out of the dream is to have an external voice that calls you and said, wake up, it's time to wake up. And then you slowly give up your dream charactership, and then you wake up. So this is the thing, you have to so outside the realm of the drama that you are in for someone to wake you up. So similarly here also, there has to be a Shabda Jnanam outside of this, because this is also like a dream. It is a dream, not like a dream, it is a dream. It is in the middle of something which is false, basically. False in the sense that it has some reality, some kind of a play, but it doesn't really last. So we are in the middle of that. And so to get out of that, it requires an external voice, an external pramana that would say, hey, what are you doing? This is something different you should be looking at. This is called the Shastrika Pramana. Here the other day somebody sent me a video clip and the clip said there was a news correspondent on television that was interviewing one of the Swamis, I forget his name, and said, Swamiji, how can we know that there is God? Because we don't see God. So you gurus say that there is God. How do we believe you? So this Swami did a very good answer. He says, let me ask you something. Don't you use GPS? So she said, yes, we do use GPS. So she says, if you use GPS, you are now trusting an alien voice that you have no idea where that is coming from. Alien voice in the sense of saying, okay, now turn left after 800 yards. Then now turn right. Now make all those kinds of things. And you're just going around with it and you reach the destination. Isn't it? So similarly, he says, you don't know where God is because you have not reached there. And you don't know, but you have to trust someone. So he said, the GPS is the Guru Positioning System. Guru Positioning System, GPS. I thought it was a really good answer. So really, this is the importance of the Shastika Pramana. But the Shastika Pramana also means that it has to be very authentic. So if someone can give you wrong instructions, which you have no idea whether they are authentic or not, you may not reach there. But we know that the GPS has been designed by somebody who don't want to fool you. There's no reason to fool you. They want you to trust it, to buy it again. And so this is an authentic pramana. So similarly here also, in the case of Vaidika Pramana, Shastrika Pramana, this is something that has been going on, from the very time memorial. There's not this is what the thing is, that the Vedanta and Vedas are not Paurushaya. They are not done by human beings. Because the human beings, we should understand why that is the case. Exactly the same point that I brought up earlier. The human beings are brought into this dream So a human being saying, I have some new religion to teach you, I've got an insight, is actually within the dream. You cannot wake you up. It has to be coming from someone which is outside this system, if you may. And that is nothing but the very creator of the whole creation is the Ishvara. And so, in the Purusha Suktam also, if we saw some of those that are attending that class, that really he says, Tasmat Yajus Tasmat Jayate Richas Samani Jaggire. He says, I made all the Vedas. This is the authentic view. Anyway, so this is the pramana. So having said that, now let us catch up with our class. So there we saw that just like you have a Laukika Pramana, which is Arthapatti. So in the Laukika Pramana Arthapatti, we saw that the street is flooded. So it's a fact. This is a Pramanam. Why? Because you trust your eyes. Your eyes open up in the morning and you go for a walk and he says, oh my gosh, there's so many puddles here. So this is called Laukika Pramanam. Okay? Pratyaksha Pramanam. Similarly to that is the Arthapatti Pramanam from Shastra. Now we saw all of that last time. That listen, you are unaffected, and you remain the same. And so this is a pramanam. It's being pointed out. And in fact, if you don't want to go through we went through several aspects of that, no change, no beginning, all of that. But just look at it, one representative of that, which is something that is easy to grasp for us, which is, you are the seer. That's it. This is the Arthapatti Pramana. You are the seer. In this very simple sentence, you are the observer or you are the seer, is packed an enormous amount of meaning, because the seer is different from the seen. And you are always the seer. Isn't it? You can just close your eyes and say, yes, aham janami. I know. Everything is I know. Regardless of what you know, regardless of any mistakes you make, do not make any mistakes, whatever. All of those are secondary things. But over and beyond, you have the sakshitvam. I know. Supposing I'm telling you something and you say, what's he talking about? I'm not sure that I agree with that. So then I can ask you, what did you say? You say, I'm not sure that I agree with what you're saying. Okay. How do you know you don't agree? Because my mind tells me I don't agree. How do you know your mind? I know. I know my mind. There you go. So, this is what is called Parabrahma, Sadashiva, Paramatma. This is Paramatma. Why is it? Because the word para is a very interesting one. It's an important one for us to really get a good grasp of it. Para means over and beyond everything else. When everything else is gone, this is still there. This is what para means. Paramatma. Paramartha. This is called param. And this param is your own sakshat, aparokshat experience. I know. I know. And the I know is the only confusion that can possibly occur is that the I knowness is my property. It is not your property. It is you. It is Swarupa, not Swabhava. So this is easy to see. The rest of the implications are more difficult to see. That I am Ananda is more difficult. And that is predictably more difficult. It takes a while. But to see that I am Parabrahman, this is what the Arthapatti Pramanam is. So we saw all of that, and that was all presented as part of the Shastrik Arthapatti Pramanam. Now we look briefly into Shastrik Anumana Pramanam. Anumana Pramanam. So there we saw that for Anumana Pramanam, you need to have a experience, a direct experience. And from that experience, you need to draw a definite conclusion. So we already looked into that. It's called Vyapti Jnanam. Yatra yatra vannihi tatra tatra yatra yatra dhumaha tatra tatra vannihi. This is the Vyapti Jnanam. Whenever there is a smoke, there is a fire. This is the Vyapti Jnanam. So the Vyapti Jnanam also needs to be learnt. So the child does not know that whenever there is a smoke, there is a fire. But as you grow up, this is introduced to you, and then you say, yes, this is absolutely true. There is no exceptions to this. And so that's it. This is called Vyapti Jnanam. So the Vyapti Jnanam is an undercurrent of all of your Anumana Pramana. Right, isn't it? So therefore, similarly here also there is a Anumana Pramanam from Shastra. What is it? It says, whenever there is a transaction in your life, whatever the transaction, Vyavahara, it is based on some error. This is the Vyapti Jnanam. This Vyapti Jnanam is the Anumana Pramanam. Anumana Pramana. So just like in the case of Laukika, in the Lokaha, we learn a inescapable truth that whenever there is a smoke, there is a fire. We don't know that initially. Somebody has to point that out. But then it becomes our own. So here the Shruti is pointing this connection, which is inseparable connection. And the connection is yatra yatra vyavaharatvam tatra tatra adhyasavatvam yatra yatra vyavaharatvam tatra tatra adhyasavatvam. This is the thing. And any adhyasa, any transaction, any vyavahara proves adhyasa. So there is an additional corollary to this, which is connected to, so the Anumana Pramanam and Arthapatti Pramanam work in conjunction with each other. They are complementary, supplementary to each other. So the Arthapatti Pramanam was Atma is unchanging. Why? Because it is the Sakshi. That we can appreciate. The fact that you are thinking now and the fact before you were thinking before, the thinking changes but the thinker remains the same. Very obvious. So in that case, this is the Arthapatti Pramanam, as we saw. Now, we can now go into Anumana Pramanam to say that, listen, if the Atma doesn't change, then any transaction must be based on adhyasa. What? How can you say that? What's the connection? Here's the connection. When you say, I am hungry, Atma cannot be hungry. Why cannot be hungry? Because we already said from our Arthapatti Pramanam that the Atma doesn't change. Hunger means some change. An hour ago I was not hungry, now I am hungry. Change. So Atma cannot be hungry. But you feel that I am hungry. So this means this hunger which you are superimposing on yourself must come from adhyasa. Your feeling, I am the body. I am not myself, I am the body. They are opposite things. You are looking at your body. It is it's an object, and you are taking yourself to be the object. It's an error. Why is it an error? Because Sakshi cannot be a body. Yeah, I can see that. And yet you take yourself to the body. Here we're going to, one of the things we're going to do very, very quickly is finish this section on the Anumana Pramanam and then give you an introduction to the actual Adhyasa Bhashyam. And so I will go through that. It will be an interesting thing because, as I had mentioned to you before, I don't propose to go through the Bhashyam in Sanskritam word for word, as Swami Dayanandji had done for us in Piercy. But I think I'm following Swami Paramarthananda's overall description. In fact, what we have been doing is the conceptual tour of the Adhyasa Bhashya. So what I will do though is go through some portions of the Adhyasa Bhashya just so that those of you that know Sanskritam and can follow the beauty of the language and how it is unfolded in the Bhashyam can appreciate it. So I'm not going to, because it's a mixed class of people that don't know the language and so on, I decided to, as you know, I have nothing new. I've decided to follow Swami Paramarthananda's method rather than Swami Dayanandaji's method. And so for that reason, I will go back to the Adhyasa Bhashya from time to time, but not word for word. Now, having said that, I want to point out one thing, which I will do later on in the formal reading of the Adhyasa Bhashya in a few minutes. But in the context of what I'm talking now, which is that I am hungry means an Adhyasa with the body. It's a body Adhyasa. So this one, Shankaracharya ji points out by the very beginning of the Shankara Bhashya, which says, Yushmat asmat pratyaya gocharayoho. And I'll continue with that in a minute. But I just want to focus on the word Yushmat asmat. Yushmat means pertaining to you. And asmat means pertaining to I. And so, this is a very interesting choice of words that Adi Shankara has used to start the Adhyasa Bhashya with. So our Acharya, Swami Dayanandaji had pointed this out very clearly. He says there is a Sanskrit word called ayam. Ayam means this. Yushmat means you. Asmat means I. So Adi Shankara says, in the you thought and I thought, there is complete oppositeness. They cannot possibly be mixed with each other. Isn't it? When I say you, I don't mix it up with myself, because I am saying me and you as being distinctly separate. However, if Shankaracharya had used the word I am, you cannot be that pure, because I am means this. So what does it mean? Means that when I am is used, some mix-up can happen. And it does happen. Why? Because you say, this body is me. You see the point? This is such a beautiful point. You can easily have a mix-up to say, this condition is me. You can even say, this hunger is me. But you can never say, you as me. You can't say that. So in the didactic analysis of Adhyasa Bhashya, Adi Shankara uses you and I. Beautiful. He is so thorough, so thoughtful. Yes, Swami Dayanandaji had pointed this out. I was reviewing my class notes a couple of days ago, and he spent quite a bit of time, probably a whole class just on this point. Anyway, so going back to the Anumana Pramanam, he says that any transaction means it is an outcome of Adhyasa. In the entire creation, any kind of a transaction, there is Adhyasa. Any in the whole creation means that it is not just human beings, even in animals. So here there is a very famous quotation which I was going to come back later on, but since again because of the context, let me just do that now. So, so in the, I hope you have a copy of this Sanskritam. So this is first chapter, second chapter, third chapter. In the fourth chapter, which is a long one, which starts with Tam etam evam lakshanam adhyasam panditaha avidya iti manyante. This is the chapter. In that, in about the 7th or 8th line, it says Tasmat avidya vat vishayani eva pratyakshadini pramanani shastrani cha iti. So he says, just to read that, he says, therefore, I mean, he has provided logic for it, and I'm just butting into the middle, so it's not sequential. Tasmat avidyavat means that the adhyasa is based on ignorance, some error of some kind. Avidya vishanani eva. So adhyasa is really connected with avidya. Pratyakshadini pramanani shastrani cha iti. So he says whatever the adhyasa is, whether it is pratyaksha or it is shastra, it is the same. How is it the same? Then comes very interesting. He says, Pashwadibhihischa avivisheshat. This is an often commented section of the Shastra. You will see this. He says, Pashwadibhi cha avivisheshat. Then he says that this adhyasa occurs even in the pashu, in the animals, not just human beings. Because all transactions in the creation are due to adhyasa. This is the Vyapti Jnanam that we saw earlier. Yatra yatra vyavaharatvam tatra tatra adhyasatvam. We saw that. That rule is never broken. Never broken. So he gives the example that even in the case of animals this happens. And then he explains it. Pashwadibhihi cha avivisheshat. So then he says, Yatha hi Pashwadayaha Shabdadibihi Shotradinam Sambandhate. Sambandhe Sati Shabdadi Vijnane Pratikule Jate Tataha Nirvartante Anukule cha Pravartante. He says, just like an animal who is watching the transaction, and suppose there is a cow, and the cow sees a person having some green grass in his hands, asking the cow, which is the staple food for the cow. It is like roti and dal for us. And if we are hungry, we would love to have food. Similarly, the cow goes towards the green grass. So it proceeds. There is a pravritti. But now suppose the person hides the green grass and takes out a danda, a big, huge stick, and with the red eyes and so on, threatens the cow. The cow recedes. This is called nivritti. So this pravritti and nivritti is all based on transactions. Why? Because the cow also has a adhyasa towards its own body. It says, oh my gosh, this guy was fooling me. He was giving me green grass and now he threatens me. And I don't want to be threatened. So he receives. This is exactly what it says. He says, now I can read it and you can see the meaning. Yathahi, just like Pashvadayaha. Pashvad means different kinds of animals. It's not just the cow. The cow is one of the most intelligent thinking animals, and so it is pointed out as a cow. But Pashvadayaha, Shabdadibhi Shotradinam Sambandhe Sati Shabdadi Vigyane Pratikule Jate Tato Nivartante Anukule Cha Pravartante. Pravritti Nivritti. Yatha, he says, Danda Udyatakaram Purusham Abhimukham Upalabhya Mam Hantum Ayamichati. So he says, oh my gosh, this guy, Danda Udyatakaram means he's holding a stick in his hand and he's looking at me. So he's threatening to harm me. I better get away from him. Mam hantum ayamichati. It is really thinking of injuring me. Iti palayitum arabhante. So then what happens is harita trina purna pani upalabhyamta prati abhimukhi bhavanti. But now, supposing he says there is a harita trinam purnam, there is green grass, there is very inviting food for me. Then he says I go towards it. Evam purusha api vyutpanna chittaha krura drishtina akroshataha khadga udyatakaran balavataha upalabhyata tato nivartante tad viparitan prati abhimukhi bhavanti. Ataha samanaha pashvadibihi purushanam pramana prameya vyavahara. So he concludes that it is similarity between animals and human beings in terms of pramana prameya vyavahara. So any pramana means that you look at whether there is danger. That's a pramanam. So when you conclude that there is some danger here, just like you're going into a street and there is a fight breaking out. Well, what's your first thing? You want to get away from it. You don't want to have anything to do with it because you may get unintentionally involved. It's called pramana. There is danger. So prameya vyavahara. So therefore now you retreat. And if there is some street music going on and somebody is playing some nice tricks and so on, you all go near it. Say, oh, this is fun, let me see what's going on. So you go pravritti and nivritti. Similarly, that of the pashu as well. So he goes on and on. He says, Pashwadinam cha prasiddha eva aviveka purvakaha pratyakshadi vyavaharaha. And tasmat tat samanya darshanat vyutpatti matamapi purushanam pratyakshadi vyavaharaha tat kalaha samana iti nischiyate. So he says that as far as your transactional activity is very similarly, and it is all due to adhyasa. Let me see if I can continue on this. No, I think I can do that later on. So he says it is established that all vyavahara, and so as we progress in this in the imbibing of this teaching in our life, so again this is the This is the idea that it should not be seen as something theoretical, not seen something theoretical, but in fact it should make the foundation of our attitudes and thinking in our life. Eventually, you should see that all of your transactions in life are really, there is no truth in it. And we will look into this in more detail. No truth in it means that there is some truth while it exists. If there is a reality only when the time when it is apparent to you, then that is not true. In fact, we're going to look into that in our next class in Drikdrishya Viveka, that verse number 38 or 39 that we are going to do today points this out. Why? Because one of the definitions of truth or relative truth is that if it only occurs while it is experienced by you and disappears after the experience goes, then it cannot be real. Just like in a dream. In the dream, something frightens you for the time being, but it's gone. We need to have a similar attitude in our waking life as well. Why? Because the so-called waking life is also transitory, and someone outside that waking life is telling us, wake up from this. And the way to wake up from this is to view all transactions as being transitory and therefore false. And this can only be possible if you have a good idea of who you are, because falseness is relative. Until the Satyam is known, then the Mithyatvam of the world is not very clear. So this is what goes hand in hand, Viveka and Vairagya. So the more you see who you really are, the more confidence you have, the more trust you have that the world in fact is not that important for me. It is really just an adhyasa. So all these theoretical points that are being brought up by Adi Shankara and Vyasa and so on, these are not just academic things that, this is just like the Pashu is also adhyasa, you are also adhyasa, then you go on to something else. No, but it's the foundation of our lives. First, this is the first step in our life. That until you know how is it that this is creating a problem for me, you cannot take the next steps. So as a foundation, the Anumana Pramanam of the Shastra is very key for us. That's what this is. Anyway, so Swami Paramarthananda also, because I took some notes from his talks, and so he may not actually go through the Sanskritam word for word, but the concepts are embedded in this. So he says, this is the Deha Adhyasa. Yeah, he's referring to the same thing. We apply that to the Manushya also. So the end result of all this is all human activities of any kind, doesn't matter whether it's with your own family members, neighbors, friends, enemies, government, whatever it is, everything is based on adhyasa. 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 And then later on, I think he also, Adi Shankaracharya also says that this is because of this adhyasa gets very sophisticated, very powerful. Why? Because I mix up what is truth and which is not truth. Satya anrite mithuni kritya. Mithuni karanam. Mithuni karanam means that they just are mixed up. And I think here the best example is that of electricity and a application of electricity in some kind of a fan or something like that. So there, for a casual observer, the difference between an appliance and the electricity is not visible and don't care. Don't care. This is exactly what happens, Satya and Anrita Mithuni Karanam. But if there is a problem of some kind, then a wise person has to figure out whether there is something wrong with this appliance or has the electricity been turned off. So there is a possibility of the electricity itself not being there. As even in California we experienced it. We lost electricity for a couple of days last summer. In India it happens all the time. But in the case of Paramatma, that electricity is never turned off. It is not possible to turn it off. Supposing you say, let me try taking, you cannot do it. Because Satyam, Jnanam, Anantam is the very Swarupa of the Paramatma. So that means that the electricity is never turned off. So that means if something is not working, it is only because of the appliance. And that's exactly what our situation is. We have to see that really the human being is an expression of the Paramatma. And the expression of Paramatma can go wrong, but the Paramatma cannot go wrong. But until that Viveka takes place, there is a mix-up. It's called Mithuni Karana. And here, Swami Paramarthananda adds to it that this adhyasa is so one thing I wanted to see was yeah. So remember we had said that Adi Shankara was going to talk about adhyasa in 5 or 6 different sections, if you recall the notes from it. So first of all was the adhyasa shanka, that there is no error. What are you talking about? And so then we said, yes, there is. And here's how it is. This is the lakshanam of adhyasa. So we just actually looked into the lakshanam of adhyasa. And then there is a sambhavana that there was a possibility of an error, but not for me. It doesn't make any sense for me. Because I'm not an object. You cannot say that this is like a rope. So there it was pointed out that listen, it's not necessary that you need to see yourself as an object, but you need to see yourself as you are. That's enough. So this is one interesting and very important aspect of this. I do not require a pramana for me to be. Listen to this very carefully. This is a very important thing. The Atma is not pramana siddham. It is not established by a means of knowledge. Atma is the only vastu which is not pramana siddham. Everything else is pramana siddham. Then what? If it is not pramana siddham, see, pramana siddham we should understand. How do we know anything is? We have to base the isness of anything based on some proof. Isn't it? Was the person there? Yes, I saw him there. Pramana. Is there a dead rat in this house? Yes, I smell it. Yeah, the other day it was, my wife and I started smelling a smell of skunk in the home. And this thing was not going away, and I kind of looked around, I didn't find any skunk. And we had a hard time even finding out where the skunks was. This is about 8 months ago. So we were looking at that. Very fortunately, I have a person. I'm really blessed by that. I have a lot of support staff that we've been doing with a number of years, and they really do a good job of protecting our gardens, this, that, or the other. So one of them is an animals control guy that we've known for like 30-40 years. He's a very busy guy, very popular guy. He runs a big business, but we've had a good relationship. So whenever I call him, he comes in. He is such an expert. My God, we had wood rats in our attic, and he found that out. He's just absolutely. So I called Steve 6 months ago and said, Steve, we've got a problem. I think there's a skunk smell somewhere. So the guy comes up and so on and so forth. He takes about 3 or 4 whiffs of the nose. Yep, it's a dead skunk. So he said, dead skunk means that it's been going on for several days. Don't you think it might be one, because we've had it in the past? He says, nope. I can distinguish between a dead skunk and a live skunk. And I instantly believed him. He's such an expert. So he says, okay, I will look for it. It turns out eventually he could not even find the dead skunk because outside it was below our deck somewhere. But he put some fans, and he says that the smell of the skunk can last for months. And so he had some powder and all this, but the skunk was dead. So for us to establish skunk, it needs a pramana. Some authority that say, yeah, this is what it is. In the case of the Atma, it is the only vastu in the whole creation that it does not need a pramana. Doesn't need a pramana. Then what? It is not pramana siddham. Atma natu pramana siddham. It is swata siddham. Very important point. It's the same point that I pointed out that if you go to the doctor, you can discuss what is wrong with you, but not that you are there. That you are there is obvious, Swatasiddha. So no pramana is required. However, if pramana is required, because even though I know I am there, I have a wrong impression of who I am. In fact, the entire goal of study and all, why are we doing all of this and so on, is to have a pramana that the Jivatma is none other than Paramatma. That I am Brahman. This is a pramanam that I need. I don't need the pramanam that I am. That's very obvious. But unfortunately, that Swatasiddhatvam is tinged with some ignorance about myself. So anyway, all of these points were brought up, which is Adhyasa Shanka, Adhyasa Samadhanam, Lakshanam, Sambhavana, then Pramanam, etc., proof of Adhyasa. So we just went through number 5, which is the Arthapatti Pramanam, Anumana Pramanam. Then comes the Upasamhara, which is a conclusion of the Adhyasa topic. And so there, Swami Paramathananda had pointed out as part of the Upasamhara that Adhyasa needs to be removed. Because you can say, okay, let it be Adhyasa, what is the big problem? This is like a theoretical thing, you know. Hey, did you know that all our transactions are you can say this, send an email to all of your friends and he says, you know, in today's class we found out that all our transactions are due to error. See what happens. It'll be interesting that people will say, you need to spend better time. Don't look at all these useless classes. And also, so what? I still want to come to your place for dinner. Whether you call it Adhyasa or not Adhyasa doesn't make any sense to me. Useless. So here, in the Upasamhara, Swami Paramathananda has pointed out, this matters. This is important. Why does it matter? Because the consequences of not knowing this are very troublesome and really have severe consequences. What are you talking about? What severe consequences? It means that you can be very unhelpful to the society. You can create problems. All the problems that were created in the previous administration, for example, was due to this adhyasa. It was a special adhyasa. But anyway, all issues in life are due to adhyasa. And forget about others. You are creating a lot of problems for yourself. How so? In fact, it is written in the Shastra that, I forget the exact quotation. He says, not knowing the Atma is perhaps the worst sin. Papa, we don't use the word sin, but papa. The worst papa that we can create to ourselves. Worst papa. Really, even more than killing another human being. Killing another human being is considered from a Laukika standpoint to be the worst papa, isn't it? You can kill a mouse, you can kill other things, but human beings you cannot kill. So that's the worst papa. Shastra says, even compared to that, if you don't know the Atma, it is a worse papa. What? What papa is that? It has the worst result possible. How is that? Because you will create more suffering in the next life as well. You are creating suffering for yourself in this life, and not by leaving this world, not inquiring into the Atma. In some way, it's an apamanam. It's an apamanam. Apamana means it's a disrespect for the Ishvara. It's a disrespect for the Ishvara. It's a good thing Ishvara doesn't hold against anything to me, but the consequences of disrespect have to be given. That's the law of life. Means that if you have a most important person sitting next to you and you ignore that presence completely, supposing the president of the country is visiting your house, which is not likely but possible. Kamala Harris, vice president. We actually have friends that know her quite well because they were born and so on. And in fact, you know what? It was interesting. This friend of ours told us when she was standing in for president that can we have a fundraiser in your house? Your house can accommodate some people. So I looked at it and I said, yeah, maybe we should do that. That'd be fun. And then the presidential debate started. And she started losing. And I said, you know what? I am not going to finance someone who is not going to become president. Why do it? And so I stopped replying to the telephone calls of my friend. Lo and behold, she has become a vice president. I wish I had done so. So supposing Kamala Harris comes to our house, because our friend who's very good friends with her, he said, I want you to meet these Kapoors and so on. So she says, okay. So she comes in. And I ignore her. I talk to my neighbor, I talk to my friends and so on. And I said, Kamala, it's okay. How will that be? She'll go back and say, what kind of a weird friend you have? He never even talked to me for 1 second. In fact, he never gave me even a glass of wine or anything. You can multiply this 1,000,000 times. That's exactly the situation. Ishvara is me. He is all around me. He's me. He's all around me as a Saguna Brahman, and he's me as a Nirguna Brahman. But I ignore his presence. Okay, so you didn't know that this is where the Shabda Jnanam comes in. So you didn't know that this is an important person. It's like, someone, I gave you the example of the vice president of Belgium. Yeah, you didn't know him, that's so you could ignore him. But once he has been introduced, do you have any grounds for continuing to do apamana? And so if we do not really inquire headlong into the truth of the self, there is an apamana. There is a disrespect of the highest order, ignorance of the highest order, and there are consequences. Adhyasa has consequences. What is the consequence? Ishvara doesn't do anything to you. The consequence is you write your own ticket. You will die as a limited person and be reborn as another limited person, go through the entire spectrum of life. If you're willing to do that, sure, go ahead. So, cause of adhyasa is ajnanam, and so therefore we need to do adhyasa nivritti. So this is the introduction to it. And so with that, let's do this. About 10 minutes or so, 12 minutes, no, 7 minutes, sorry, 7 minutes. Let's do a brief reading, as I promised. It took me longer to get here than I expected. Let's do a brief reading about the Adhyasa Bhashya. And then what I would recommend to you, suggest to you, for those of you that know Sanskritam, is to go through the Sanskritam and then also see the translation. So you will enjoy doing that. And then having already set so I think that the Adhyasa Bhashya description conceptually is pretty much over. So we are done with that. So the next thing that you can do, for those of you that are capable and interested, is to actually read the Bhashya and take one of the translations. So one translation is given by Swamini Satya, what's her name? Swamini Satya, not Satyananda. Anyway, it's given here right in behind your Sanskritam, right here. And the other one is the one from Swami Gambhirananda, which I also was reading this. I've never really read it per se, but I was reading this one. So this is given in, so let's even, you know what, I'll give you a quick sample of this. So let me do this. So let me read some passages, small passage, and then also read the translation. So you can do this on your own. Perhaps I will do some of it also, but if not, then at least you can do it. And now you will see a one-for-one correspondence between the conceptual treatment that Swami Paramarthananda had given and also the actual word for one by Adi Shankara. So Adhyasa Bhashyam starts. If you have this piece of paper that I sent to you, I think you all have that. So, Yushmat asmat pratyaya gocharayoho Vishaya Vishayinoho Tama Prakashavat Viruddha Dharma Viruddha Swabhavayoho Itare Itara Bhava Anupapattau Siddhayam. So let's stop there. Let me read it one more time. Yushmad asmat pratyayo Yushmad asmat pratyaya gocharayoho Vishaya Vishayinoho Tamaprakashavat Viruddha Sabhavayoho Itara Itara Bhava Anupapattau Siddhayam. So we can start backward from Itara Itara Bhava Anupapattau Siddhayam. He says, having established the untenability, Anupapattau, having established the untenability, not possible. Untenability means not possible. For you and you thought and I thought being mixed up together, like darkness and light. Beautiful example. You know, so you can mix up black and white. because it becomes gray. So there is a mix-up possible. But there is no mix-up possible between darkness and light. As soon as you cannot tell Miss Darkness, Miss Darkness, can you please stay? I know I see the light, but that I want you to be there too. Miss Darkness is going to disappear completely just as soon as the light occurs. So Swami Dayananji had given us this beautiful example one time. He said, look at this untenability of darkness and light to coexist. So I don't know whether this was a real case or he made it up, but he says that in Tamil Nadu, the old days, when there was a village wedding, and in those days there was no electricity, and so you had these powerful Petromax lamps that could burn for hours and emanate a lot of light. And so it was very common for the villagers, whenever there is a big wedding of some kind, to have some Petromax lamps around, and so that there is no darkness around. So he got some Petromax lamps, and he said, so the host told one of the people that he hired a person and said, listen, your job is, I'm going to pay you some money. You put this Petromax lamp on top of your head, okay? And I want you to go wherever you see darkness. You go and stand there. This is what you need to do, because there are people milling around, and I want to make sure, just like in these days, in the cold weather and the COVID, whenever there is a heater, my wife and I went to a restaurant the other day, and they didn't have enough heaters. They were sharing heaters between 4 or 5 different tables, and we froze to death. And we said, we're not coming back here again. So just like this, the guy said, okay, wherever there is darkness, you go with your Petromax. And please, that's your job. You do this for an hour and I'll pay you a lot of money. So after about 5 or 7 or 10 minutes, the guy comes back and says, sir, I can't do this job. You're making a fool out of me. So he says, what do you mean? What is the problem? He says, sir, you asked me to find out whenever there is darkness, I have to go there. And I looked around and I could not find any darkness. And so you're just making a fool out of me, and I'm not going to do this job. So darkness and light cannot coexist. Beautiful example. It's not black and white, it is darkness and light. So he says, really speaking, there is untenability of establishing some kind of a identity between darkness and light, and yet we do it. Drik Drishya is exactly like that. This is what he says, Yushmad Asmat Pratyaya Gocharayo Vishaya Vishayino Tamaprakashavat. The darkness and light. Viridhu Sabhavayo Itara Itara Bhava Anupapattao. It is impossible to have this connection, not possible. And then he goes further, and we will do that next time. So anyway, we'll have to stop the class. It's already 9:17, and we'll continue with it. We'll do some reading of this bhashya as we go forward, and then we will get into, once that is somewhat complete, and I use the word carefully, somewhat means I cannot be doing exhaustively, or I think conceptually we've already done so. Then we will move into the first sutra, Athato Brahma Jigyasa. Okay, so that's the plan. Let's finish our prayers. Om Rahu Grasta Divankarendu Sadrisho Maya Samachadinat Sanmatra Karnopasamharnato Yo Bhut Sushuptaf Puman Pragaswapsamiti Prabodha Samaye Yah Pratyabhigyayate Tasmai Shri Guru Murtaye Namaidam Shri Dakshina Murtaye Balyadishu api jagradadishu tatha sarva svavastha swapi vyavritta svanuvartamana mamityanta spurantam sada swatmanam prakati karoti bhajatam yo mudraya bhadraya tasmai Shri Guru Murtaye namaidam Shri Dakshina Murtaye Vishvam pashyati karya karanataya Swaswami sambandhataha Shishyacharya tathaiva pitra Putradhyatmana bhedataha Swapne jagrati vaya esha purusho Maya paribhramitaha Tasmai Shri Guru Murtaye namaidam Shri Dakshina Murtaye Bhurambhamsya nalo nilo ambar maharnartho himamshuv puman Ityabhati characharatmakamidam yasyaiva murtyashtakam nanyat kinchina vidyate mimrishatam yasmat parasmat vibhoho tasmai Shri Guru Murtaye namaidam Shri Dakshina Murtaye sarvatmatvamiti sprutikritamidam yasmatamushmin stave Tenasya shravanat tadarthamananat dhyanat cha sankirtanat sarvatmatva mahavibhuti sahitam syadishwaratvam swataha siddhyet tat punarashtadha parinatam chaishwaryam avyahatam om ashubhani nirachashthe tanoti shubhasantatim Smriti matrena yat pumsam brahmatan mangalam param ati kalyana rupatvat nitya kalyana samshrayat smartranam varadatvat cha brahmatan mangalam viduhu omkaraschata shabdascha dvavetau brahmanah pura kantham bhitva viniryatau tasmat mangilakau vabhau omatha omatha Om Atha. Okay. Shri Dakshina Murta. Ashish, you've changed your name to Ashish M. Good. Much better than 711. Good. This is Ashish Mudgal, not Ashish Asthana. Krishna Ryan, Kalpana, Anjali, Sudha, Shrida, Neeta Muni, Zarina, Sanjeev, Rachel, Surjit Dikshit, Shubha, Rani Goyal, Ram Mandalam, Sukshma Bhatia, Chawla Joshi, Arvind Taylor, Lakshmi, Raj Velpuri, Ila Joshi, Shobana, and Akshay, Virendra Singh, Satish Jalota, Raji, Varun, Keshav Chopra, Ganeshan, hello Ganeshan, Chandra Dulam, Nitin Mohan, Srinivas, Jugal and Bimla, Suresh Belani, Subroto, Shanti Kumar, Sulochana, Neela Tanna. It's a new name. If you could please let me know something about yourself, Neela, I'd appreciate it. Kirsten, hello Kirsten. Good. In Gambia, I see, interesting. So internet is surprisingly good, that's wonderful to know. Joe Shekhar, K. Shankar, Ashish Asthana, both the Ashishes are there, Kalpana Dave. Kalpana Dave, which page is, I think, sorry, there were a couple of names that I didn't. Surendra Bhargava, Darshana, Vishwanath, Suvarna Banjara, Gajananam, Punita Pandey, Jaya Chaudhary, and then Ashish that I took up. So which page is Swami Gambhiranand's translation on? It's called, so there I think he starts with, Samanvaya. That's exactly right, reconciliation. He doesn't call it Shankara Bhashya, I don't know why not. I also noticed it, so that's the page that's on. Surjit says you use the term Upasamhara. What does that mean? Upasamhara means a summary. Upakrama is the beginning, Upasamhara is the ending. And so our Shastras generally follow these lingas. So lingas means, there's always just on that point of the Upasamhara, there's always a lot of challenges from scholars that that on the context of the Vidya, that this is not what Vidya is being talked about. There is a different Vidya that should be done. There's always challenges and so on. So in meeting challenges, what is pointed out is that you need to have some lingam. You need to have some definite methodology based on which one can say this is the context or not. So as part of those lingams, there is Upakrama, Upasamhara, that there should be some beginning. It's very much like a good talk or a good article even. When these editors review an article, they expect the author to follow certain good guidelines. And one of them is, it's like a talk when you're giving. You have to tell people, this is what I'm going to talk about today. Then you talk about it. And then during the talk, you repeat some of the points and so on. And then at the end, you say, by the way, this is what I talked about today. So that is what is called Upasamhara. So Ashish Asthana says, I have been trying to read the shlokas in Swami Gambhirananda's translations. A bit difficult without guidance. Do you recommend some of the key ones you contemplate in advance? I think that, quite frankly, I agree with you, Ashish. This is not going to be easy. Even the English that he uses is kind of like old standard English. And so it is difficult to do. But on the other hand, so what I would say is that if you don't know Sanskrit very well, then it would be difficult to do this anyway. But if you do know Sanskrit, then I think the Gambhiranand translation is fair. So let me give an example. Let's look at the first sentence that we took up. Yushmad asmat pratyaya gocharayoho vishay vishenoho tamaprakashavad anupapattau siddhayam. Actually, we didn't finish the whole sentence, but that was a partial. So let's see what Swami Gambhirananda says. And we should also see what Swami Satyavidananda, I forget her name, the Swamini. She also gave a translation when she taught here, I think a year ago. And so we can read hers also. Okay, so this is the preamble. He says, Swami Gambhirananda, it being an established fact that the object and the subject that are fit to be the contents of the concept you and we. It's a strange language. You can just simply say, what is the meaning of you and I? And by nature are as contradictory as light and darkness, very correct, cannot logically have any identity. So, I think so. This is following. You can follow this. I think that's a good portion to that. Now let's look at Swamini's translation. Sorry. That the sense object Vishaya and the subject of the sense objects Vishayi, Vishayin, which are within the range of the denominative power of the words Yushmat and Asmat. Denominative power, I'm not sure why would you use that anyway. I'm not criticizing anyone. I'm just telling you that you have to go beyond the language itself in some ways. So it's interesting. I'll just finish with that. This word gochara. In fact, you know what? I'm running out of time, so I'll do that next time. This word gochara is a very interesting one that Swami Maheshananji explained. And I will comment on that next week. Anyway, so to cap off what Ashish was asking, I don't know how else to do that unless we have a class which don't have time, where we look at each word and look at the meaning of it. You're going to have to take a English translation and the Sanskritam, if you know it, and then make sense out of that. And all we can do is to do it segment by segment, and so that it doesn't become too convoluted for you. So I don't know what else at this point. Kalyan Raman, good Kalyan, thank you for letting me know. Surjit says Swami Gambhirananda's book also does not seem to actually have Sanskrit Bhashya. That is correct. Yes. Yes, there is another book. I had that here. That does have the Sanskritam. But you know, I'm going to give that to you anyway. I'm going to give that to you. Well, I only can give it to you for whatever I'm teaching. So you'll have the Sanskrit for that. But there are some other books. In fact, that's a good point. I think there is another book that has the Sanskrit also. And I will try to recommend that for you. Okay, Surjit. Raji, with more and more understanding, should each one of us also feel the need for less Petromax lights? It is that the perspective with which we should take in that example? No, it's not that as much as the fact that it simply says that this is just an example that darkness and light cannot exist together. That's all that it was meant for. What we should be doing and so on, this will become clearer as we proceed. I would say that the big lesson we should take from Adhyasa Bhashya as for the entire Vedanta is that we are unnecessarily exaggerating the importance of the world in my life and the importance of myself as a jiva in this context. Unnecessarily. We are projecting something which is not there, and we should recognize it. It's not going to be easy for us to do, but we better start on that whole process. So this is the adhyasa, not based on any karma, but just based on the fact that, my gosh, this is a mistake. And to be convinced that this is a mistake is not easy, because as we saw in the Purva Paksha, and he says, what mistake are you talking about? Life it goes on very well. But I don't understand this mistake business. To which the answer is, yes, there is mistake. You better believe it. And so that's the main thing we should be getting. Otherwise, Petromax, etc. No, that was just a simple example of the light and darkness never being able to coexist. Yes, Ashish says the Sanskrit of the preamble will be helpful. No, you already have the Sanskrit of the preamble. Preamble here means the Adhyasa Bhashya. You already have that, Ashish. I sent that to you so you should have that. The one that I was reading, Yushmad Asmat Pratyayoho. If you don't have it, please send me an email and I'll send you a separate one. All right. I think we better close the class. Good. We will see you next week, hopefully. All right. Om.